Hey everyone, coming in with this week's episode of Leap this month. Today we're talking taxes, which is going to be a great conversation. Personally, a topic I dread myself, so pretty excited to dig into this one and hopefully just alleviate some anxiety, generally speaking, around this time of year. Here we go. We did it. Hey.
Hi.
So happy to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. I just really appreciate taking the time.
Yeah, this is exciting. It's like a two for one. I get to hang out with you for 30 minutes. I get to talk to your amazing community. I get to talk about taxes. It's a win-win-win.
Yes, definitely. I was just saying how this is personally a topic that I absolutely dread. So I'm really happy to dig into it and just unpack all that. But let me do a little bit of an intro here and then we can get things going. Thanks for those of you who are joining us and for people who are just trickling in. If you haven't been here before, I'm Rachel Rennick. Hey, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Lethos, which is a platform that helps freelancers start and scale their businesses and studios. Every month, I interview different creative entrepreneurs about their journey taking the leap. And I'm super excited about this week's guest, Angie, who actually runs a company, an app for freelancers to help them manage their taxes and their savings. So Angie is the founder and CEO of Ruby Money. It's a mobile app to help freelancers earn more and avoid costly tax mistakes, which honestly, personally, definitely have been there. Since its founding in 2021, Angie's raised over $2 million in funding. Fun fact, we share investors, for those of you out there who are wondering. Ruby Money actually launched its flagship app in the App Store, and it tracks self-employment income, and then it helps you basically save for quarterly taxes and then automatically pay those taxes, which is pretty amazing. So super excited. Angie, before becoming an entrepreneur, which is good context to have, was actually in leadership roles at Instagram, Capital One, Visa. She's been all over the fintech scene, has taught me a lot personally, and was born and raised in New Orleans, currently living in Charleston in the South. I'm also in the South right now. So it's just a whole Southern party here.
Yeah.
Appreciate you joining us. Angie, I'd love to just start quickly with like a little bit of backstory and, like how you landed on this specific problem when it comes to independent businesses.
Yeah. And again, thanks, Rachel, for having me and that super sweet intro. I mean, I think similar to Wethos, our mission is really to make entrepreneurship sustainable for anybody who dares to take the leap. And, I know firsthand when I was consulting and freelancing in between my different corporate gigs, I was very shocked by the amount of administration and the number of decisions you had to make and how hard it was to do all of the things that were outside of the craft. And, there wasn't an accounting department, there wasn't an HR department, there wasn't a finance department. Like you're all the departments, right? And there was just a lot of administrative tedium. And as somebody who likes to be organized, likes to be on top of stuff, I just found myself constantly drowning in like a sea of details. And so
Totally.
I think a lot of people like kind of can relate to that. And I remember this one year during COVID when I had a pretty lucrative product consulting gig. I went to my husband's accountant. He kind of managed the accountant relationship for our family because I always had pretty simple W-2 taxes. And it was kind of too late to the point where I realized that I hadn't really tracked anything separately. I hadn't known about any of the different deductions. I hadn't really thought of myself as a small business owner. And so
Totally.
fast forward, I had overpaid my taxes. Well, I had a big surprise tax bill that I hadn't budgeted for, but I found out after the fact that it was about 12 grand more than it should have been because I just made stupid mistakes. And I think as was a woman, particularly me, I have a finance degree. I worked at a bank. I was a little embarrassed and ashamed. Like, how did I screw this up so bad? And then that's where the light bulb moment, that's where I had that aha of like, well, wait a second, there's just no way I'm the only one. And so I started reaching out to all the other people I knew who consulted and freelanced and found out that just the number of things you have to keep track of when you're earning income independently and knowing what the forms are and knowing what taxes to pay. There's just a lot there. And so that was kind of the inspiration behind the company. But when kind of fast forward to now, I think it's ultimately this idea of as a self-employed person, your time is incredibly valuable and every minute of your day is really important. You should be using that to do something you love something that brings you joy, or something you're getting paid for. And for most
Amen.
freelancers, you know, and most creative freelancers, figuring out finance is not one of them. And so for the things that don't bring you joy, that you aren't getting paid for, how do you automate them? How do you outsource them? And so, you know, I really wanted Ruby Money to come into the world and be a tool that helped, you know, make it possible for more freelancers to take that leap, to thrive financially. You know that there are systems and organizations like Wethos and Ruby Money that are here to take some of that load with them and walk the path with you. And taxes is the load we take.
Totally. And you know, it honestly makes me feel so much better because I have also been a freelancer and I went to art school. And so when I screwed all this up, similarly, I was already like beating myself up and being like, wow, I really am a dumbass, you know, like, and it honestly just makes me feel better to just hear from somebody who has like a literal finance degree, like, no, there's just not a clear playbook for a lot of this. And a lot of the lines are blurry between personal and business. And, you know, when you are your business, it can definitely get a little weird, I guess. In terms of taxes in particular, so would love to just understand from what you're hearing from people, like what are some of the biggest challenges? What are the things that tend to like overwhelm people when it comes to their taxes and cause just like a lot of stress?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like literally the word taxes, right? It's the fear of the unknown.
It's triggering.
Right? It's this mix of like, I have to give away my money, and then the three scariest letters in the world, like IRS. I mean, if you go to, speaking of being like feeling like a dumbass, I mean, I feel like if you go to irs.gov, they should basically just put a huge pop-up that says like, you're a dumbass, good luck, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it, I think,
100%.
really is fear of the unknown. And so I think that's why a lot of people will sort of outsource this entire category to an elder in their life, you know, or like everyone's like their uncle's CPA, their father's CPA, like,
totally,
you know, whatever. And I think the challenging thing about that is that if you are a professional freelancer, if you're offering a creative service, a knowledge service, like literally taxes are your number one expense, you know, separate from like hiring other contractors. You don't have, you know, inventory sitting around. You're not selling, you know, cups and t-shirts on Etsy. You're selling your knowledge, you're selling your brain, you're selling your talent. And so taxes are literally going to be 25 to 45% of your income. And so I think recognizing that and knowing that that then becomes part of your business strategy. How do you tackle that? How do you create a cash flow plan for that? And how do you create a strategy to, frankly, to lower that? And so I think just like not knowing where to begin and therefore like putting your head in the sand and doing nothing is kind of the number one thing I see. I think the second thing I see is the confusion between kind of the year-round tax process of like estimating and saving for taxes and tracking your deductions. And then this thing that's happening right now as we approach April, which is the annual filing of taxes. And we can go into that, but I think a lot of us are used to the annual filing of taxes, but when you become self-employed, there's this whole other thing that happens year round that can be very mystifying, and it's really important to get it done. And that's what we really work on.
Yeah, I feel like that is a huge misconception because it's so easy to go from just being like an everyday consumer person to suddenly a freelancer, which is classified as a business, and that's just like got a totally different ball game to it. But they don't necessarily make that easy. And frankly, like to your point about not having inventory and not needing like physical products and things, it should be easier than ever to start a freelance business today. And yet it still is not. It still is super complicated. So I feel like that's a totally understandable thing that, you know, and I definitely understand like the analysis process of like not knowing what to do or how to start. So you just don't do anything, which can really bite you. What do you think is like the number one mistake that you see people are making when it comes to like managing the tax or filing the taxes, or maybe to your point earlier, like paying more than
I mean, it's hard to pick one, but I think it's this concept of having a plan. I think it's knowing what you're going to pay in taxes, like basically knowing your tax rate. It's kind of like not knowing your rate, right? You know your rate if someone says like, what do you charge, what your scope is, right? Wethos is in the business of helping you figure out what your rate. Like the kind of second question is like, how much of this money is mine? So what is your tax rate? And that's like, it's like a checkup. Like it's like knowing what your blood pressure is. You should just generally know what your tax rate is, because that is going to give you foundationally an understanding of like, how much of this money that I'm earning is mine, right? And so, you know, it depends on the state you live in, your sort of filing status and how much you think you're going to make for the year. But most people, it's going to be, some people it'll be as low as 20%, but for a lot of people, especially if you live in California or New York, you might end up paying close to 40% of your, net income and self-employment taxes. So I think that's the like most important thing, is just like the awareness that it exists. I think once you get past that, it's like, well, what are you doing about it every day? How are you creating a practice so that you have budgeted to set that money aside? And so I found that a lot of people are like, well, when I worked for a company, my company just did that. Well, they don't file your end of year taxes, but what they do is every time you get paid, there's a little bit of money that comes out of your paycheck. You never see it, never lands in your bank account, and it goes to the IRS. And so recreating that experience by creating an automation to almost take that out of your own net pay and set that aside, so that when you do come to pay your taxes, either quarterly or at the end of the year, that money's gone. Like, you're not counting on it. You're not having this like heart attack moment that everyone's about to have when they click pay on April 15th and they see this like huge chunk of money go out their business account, because it's already gone, right? It was never their money to begin with. They were borrowing it from the IRS. So they're setting it aside every time they get paid. That's literally what we recommend, is every time a client pays you, you get $1,000, you take that estimated tax rate, 23%, 33%, whatever it is, and you immediately take that $330 and you move it to a separate account. And later on, maybe you find some tax deductions, you might find some extra money there, but at least you've set that money aside. And when you go to make investments in your business or pay yourself, you're doing it from like a true net income. You're not you're not accidentally spending the IRS's money.
Yeah. And I feel like when it comes to setting that money aside, the best way to do it is to set up that automation, because especially when so many people, like I know in particular, are doing a lot of like project-based stuff. And so the actual income isn't every 2 weeks like you would have like a normal, paycheck. It is very up and down, and it can be in big chunks over here and smaller chunks over there. And so having that automation set up, I think, is probably the best way to handle it, like in general, just to make sure that you're being safe about it. When it comes to like, I want to talk a little bit about like, what are the hacks? Like when it comes to, getting money back from the IRS, or, writing stuff off that you may not be writing off right now. Like, what do you think are the top couple of things that people don't miss, basically?
So I think you should not try to get money back from the IRS. I know there's all these like ads everywhere that's like, I can get you $5,000 back from the IRS. If you're doing that, that means you overpaid the IRS, right? What you want to do is pay them what they owe them, but kind of no more or no less, right? You pay less, you pay penalties, you pay more. You've given the IRS money that you could have used to spend on a vacation or invest in your business. And so I think the important thing to do is like get a really good sense of what your business deductions are throughout the year. Don't wait until the year is done and it's February and you're running around with like spreadsheets and credit card statements and you're like uploading stuff to, some CPA's portal, and like they don't know your business. They don't know like why you ate out this day. They don't know that you need a ring light and a tripod to do IG lives, right? And so keeping track of that year round is really important. So I think one of the biggest hacks is having a separate bank account for your business expenses and your business income. It doesn't have to be a business bank account. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be a separate bank account, because then all the money that gets spent out of that account is for your business and you don't miss any of those business expenses. So that's just like basic, because so many people I know just like are like, well, I didn't make a lot of money this year. I just didn't keep track of my expenses. Well, I mean, money's money, right? Like, like whether it's $10 or $100, it's money. The second hack is around, there's a couple, so deductions are an interesting thing, because most deductions are actually the expenses you spend on your business, right? Like your computer, your software subscriptions. Those are really important to keep track of, because you get 30% of that back in the form of a tax refund, but you still spent the money, right? The money's not like, money's gone. The best hack that I like sharing with self-employed people is tax-free retirement. And what I basically call that, it's a profit shelter. It is a loophole that the IRS has created specifically for self-employed people to say, like, I'm going to give you the ability to stash 25% of your profits away from the IRS. We won't see them. We won't tax them. The trick is they have to go into a special account called an IRA, an individual retirement account. And if you're self-employed, there's like a bonus account called a SEP IRA, which allows you to put up to 25% of your profits as a solopreneur. So just like to give you like a very, very quick math example, if you were to, maybe you make $100,000, you get that big kind of six-figure goal for the year. You say you're going to put 10% of that, $10,000 of your profit into an IRA account. Let's say you live in a medium high tax state like New York and your tax rate 35%. 3,500 of that 10,000 that you put away immediately comes off your taxes. So your tax bill just dropped by 3,500, but you didn't actually spend the money. You just paid future you. So it's this concept of like paying yourself first, paying future you. And so granted, you can't touch that money for a few years, but it hasn't gone to the IRS. It's you've stashed that profit. And that is, when you start talking to small business owners and you start talking to really, really big business owners, this is like literally one of the top wealth creation strategies. And I think freelancers just think like, oh, it's not for me, I'm not wealthy enough, but it's like, it's just pure gravy. And so even if you're only setting aside $100 every paycheck or a couple hundred every month, rather than putting that in a brokerage account, or Robinhood or crypto or whatever, TikTok is telling you to do, just like be boring and put it in an IRA, because the money works double for you. It lowers your taxes and it earns interest over time.
Yeah, and going back to your point about like people kind of disqualifying themselves from thinking like, oh, this is a strategy that I can do and implement. I guess, one thing that's on my mind is there an inflection point in a freelance business where they should start to make that shift? Is it something that ideally you do from day one, but realistically, like, the idea, I think when you have really early days, like kind of volatile income of like putting something into an account that I can't touch in case of an emergency or whatever is scary. What's sort of like your sense in terms of what the right inflection point is, or is it your advice to say like from day one, you should be doing that regardless of like how predictable basically your income is?
I think that's a really, really good question. So I think like taxes, unfortunately, nothing's more certain in life than death and taxes. So you should like set aside money for taxes first. I think most financial advisors will say like, make sure you have 6 months of like living money set aside, right? So between you and your spouse and any other income you have, like make sure you have some sort of bank account where like your car breaks down, right? Like you need to go see a doctor, like you have that cash set aside. I think once you have those covered, then you're operating in the space where you're either, bonusing yourself or you're investing more in your business. And that will be different for everyone. But when you get that point where it's like, okay, my taxes are covered, I'm setting aside 20%, 25% for taxes. I've got enough where, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent this month. That's the point where I would say, whether it's 2%, 3%, 5%, like turn on that IRA savings rule. And you can always decide at the end of the year to not invest that money, to not, you can make the trade-off of like cash now versus cash later. But for most people, once it's set aside, they're pretty excited about it being there. And very rarely have any of our members taken the money out. If anything, they're like, wait, like I can go up another percent, because the way that our app works is we ask you to choose a percent, because like you can't choose a whole dollar amount. You don't know what your next invoice is going to be for, right? So we have you choose a percent. And so people start at 3 or 4%. It's like, and then they just kind of tick up over time to the point where, they're stashing away real money. And it just, the tax benefits of it is so huge that it becomes addictive.
Yeah, and that can compound over time for sure. And I think like, so I guess like, what I'm hearing you say is build up that foundation, the 6 months, the safety net essentially for yourself. And when you can get to that point, your, month to month cash flow or income, it being super predictable becomes less of an issue or less of a risk in terms of setting aside money with each invoice that is getting paid, basically, because if something does come up, at least you have that safety net. So that totally makes sense. I think from one question that we get all the time, or something that blindsides people a lot, is that like quarterly versus annually situation. Can we unpack that a little bit? Like what is the difference? When and how and why should people be doing it quarterly or annually?
Yes.
And sort of what are the
this is such a confusing, scary topic for people that I think we literally just like rebranded our homepage, or we were thinking about like quarterly taxes done for you, because it's so or people are just like, I don't get it. Like, what do you want me to do? So here's the basic, like, you should be paying the IRS literally every time you earn money. And that's when you work for an employer, you do it, they do it for you through via payroll provider every 2 weeks. When you work for yourself, they're like, every 2 weeks, that's kind of seems like a lot. Like, we're mean, but we're not that mean. So we're just going to go ahead and say like 4 times a year. 4 times a year, go ahead and send us what you think you owe us. We're not going to tell you what you owe us, but we're going to just have you guess how much you owe us and send it in 4 times a year. And that's called quarterly taxes. If you don't do that and you wait until, April of the following year, they're like, you kind of owed us all this money all year. And like, thanks for paying us now, but like, that's not cool. And they will apply a tax penalty on your tax return. And I would tell anybody who has ever had a CPA to file their taxes. I went back and looked at my last couple years tax return. Your CPA doesn't tell you about this. They just calculate it and put it on there. And so I was like, what? I paid $600 in like IRS penalties for not paying quarterly taxes. That's nuts. Like it's no one's responsibility to do that for you. You're just supposed to magically know how to do it. So that's kind of how the quarterly estimated taxes work. Now, for some people, it's worth it to have that cash flow throughout the year and just cut that big check at the end of the year and pay that $300, $400, $500, $600 IRS penalty. I think that's a dangerous slippery slope to be on unless you have a really complex understanding and a really stable understanding of your finances and you have professionals advising you to do that. The safer way is to just follow the recommendations, make those quarterly estimated payments. Now, sadly, most people who have had to pay quarterly estimated payments have been larger businesses, right? This whole freelance industry is still fairly nascent. And so there aren't a lot of tools out there to tell you what those quarterly estimated payments will be. So your options are either like stick your finger in the air. There's a really, really scary form on the IRS website that you could download and try to figure it out yourself. I've done it. It's challenging. Or you could pay a CPA, and some CPAs will take a couple $100 from you every quarter and they'll calculate your quarterly taxes for you. So what we did at Ruby Money is we just like took that crazy document and the formula that all the CPA use, we built it into the app. And so we self-calculate what your estimated payment should be based on what you've already made so far this year. So we check your income 4 times a year, we check your expenses, and we give you that estimate so you can make that quarterly payment and never worry about getting a surprise tax bill at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every lesson I've learned about the IRS is always the hard way. Like, it's always because I already screwed it up and then I found out later and I'm like, ugh, like, just that's
that, I mean, isn't that like how you
that,
feel about
like,
entrepreneurship? Like everything's
oh, yeah. And also my entire
right. It's like, it's never obvious until you've already done the opposite and learned the hard way. So there's no like shame. It bothers me that people either like feel shame that they did it the wrong way or feel like it's too hard to learn, like, and even like the way that we're talking about, sometimes I'm like, the app is easier than this conversation. Like, you don't have to know any of the things that I just talked about to kind of automate this and put it in place. Like, that's sort of the goal of this, is like, we got you, like, I want to explain it so people understand like the method behind the madness and what's happening to their money. And I think financial education needs to be a part of like high school curriculum. It needs to be a part of art school. It needs to be part of like everything we do, right? And so I think it's important to know a little bit about how it works, but like just a little bit.
Yeah, just enough, because I think if you get too deep into it, it becomes, you either get infuriated as the deeper you understand how chaotic the system actually is and arbitrary how it all is, or you just like lose your mind slowly because it's just a ridiculous, complicated thing to understand, and it's complicated on purpose, and it's like convoluted on purpose. So they don't expect you to, they're not trying to make it easy basically, but good thing we have technology to layer on top and to help sort of streamline that whole process. Angie, one last question that I ask all of our guests, which is, do you have one piece of advice for any freelancers out there who are either thinking about taking the leap or have recently taken the leap, either by choice or maybe not, given all the layoffs that are going on?
Yeah, I'm really happy you didn't ask me like, what's your favorite song right now, or something very pop culture that I would like stress out to answer. I'd be like feeling like, what do cool people say their favorite song is right now?
You were like, Tammy, you thought that's hilarious. I'm like, oh God, no, that would stress me out. I would hate that.
Yeah, so this one's way easier. I mean, you just gotta like do it, right? You gotta jump in. Like I was held back for a number of years working in very kind of illustrious corporate jobs and got very lucky. And then I had times where I got laid off from my illustrious corporate jobs and I was panicked about what to do next. And I think the most important thing to just believe is that like you have a gift. You had those jobs because you have a gift, you have a skill, you have a talent. There are multiple ways to go to market with your talent, right? The traditional corporate workforce, talking to recruiters, like that is one way, and that might be the way you're like most comfortable with. But there's now so many new ways and paths that are being formed for you to like take your skills to market. And this is such an amazing opportunity that like frankly didn't exist 15 years ago, where you get to like, it's like, build a blocks, right? Build a bear. You get to make the career you want. How many clients do you want? How many projects do you want? I was just talking to this amazing guy, Ernie Pack, that started a newsletter called Part-Time Tech. And it's full of, engineers from laid off tech companies that are like, I never really liked this lifestyle. I've always wanted to just work 25 hours a week, do a project on the side, and like hang out with my kids. Like, can we all band together and start, asking traditional employers to hire us part-time? And so I just think there's so many opportunities to kind of buck the system, try new paths. And so have like faith in yourself and faith in the journey. It won't be easy. I think you and I can attest that carving your own path as like female entrepreneurs in fintech and is hard. I think every time that I've been a consulting as a freelance role, there's a period of like, am I good enough to be here, that you go through. But you just recognize there's like absolutely a market for what you're good at. And like you have to hustle, right? You have to hustle whether you're applying for full-time jobs or looking for consultants, and just sort of embrace that and just have faith in yourself and give yourself grace and use us. Use Wethos, use
Yes,
Money. Like we can help you. I mean, but be part of communities of like-minded people, right? Like the more solopreneurs and freelancers that you reach out to, that you connect with, the more the universe will like open up to you. Once you say you want to do something out loud and you tell like 2 people, all of a sudden they tell you 4 other people that want to do the same thing. And it just kind of is like, it snowballs. So just like make your intention known and start taking a couple steps in that direction and let the world take over the rest.
Awesome. I love that. Angie, if people want to follow along, if they want to download the app, where's the best place they can do that? And we've got a little partnership special going on here. Can you tell everybody a little bit more about that?
Yeah,
as well?
So you can definitely just follow us on Instagram. You can go to our website, rubymoney.us. The app is in the Apple App Store. We're still working on Android right now, but you can download it in the App Store and get started. The app is free. We do have a paid plan that does some of the fun, exciting things, like pays your taxes for you and lets you have quarterly calls with a tax advisor. But there is still a free version of the app that you can use to track your income and track what you owe in taxes. And so I encourage everyone at a minimum to do that, figure out what your tax rate is, just so you have that knowledge going forward. The special is that for Wethos members, we're offering 50% off for your first 3 months of the pro paid plan. And so just when you decide to upgrade to the paid plan, just put Wethos promotion code in there, and that will just knock the price down and make it easy breezy to kind of give us a try. But yeah, just really excited to
Amazing.
help out all of the. Is there a word? Do we have like a Wethos E? Do we call Wethos?
We do. Well,
people something.
We have a link for
no.
the. Oh no,
like Wethies.
It's gonna be a no from me. I'm not sure that that'll ever be a thing for us. It's like, it's just that the word is weird. The whole thing would be weird.
Yeah.
I'm not that fun.
I don't know, but you do have some awesome new swag that I see everybody's like angling for now.
I do. Yeah, I do. Wait, I've got a sweater here. Hang on. Here we go. We're going to start sending these out.
So cute. Love it.
A little bit of nice. We love it. Love the purple. Lavender.
Because the world does not need another black tech hoodie.
It does not. That is correct. It needs a purple hoodie, and now it has one. Amazing. Well, Angie, thank you so much again for joining us. This was amazing. So many learnings. We'll be reposting the full video, some clips, all the things in the coming weeks. Yay. But for those of you who are stressed out right now, go check out Ruby Money. I signed up myself. I went through the whole flow. The calculator is amazing. Really does make you feel a lot better about your just life in general. So definitely check it out. I would recommend that. We'll be back next month with another guest and another episode of The Leap. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye.